The sun was just starting to warm the cracked asphalt of Old Highway 95. It was one of those slow Saturday mornings when the air smelled of fresh brewed coffee and toasted cinnamon rolls. Rosie's diner was waking up slowly. Ceiling fans spun lazily overhead. The clock struck 9, and an old Johnny Cash song played on the jukebox, mixing with the clinking of mugs and quiet conversations. In the widest corner of the place, taking up 3 tables pushed together, sat the Thunder Riders, a group of 8 bikers known for their black leather jackets emblazoned with a winged helmet and lightning bolt. Some feared them, others admired them, but everyone knew they didn't mess with anyone who wasn't looking for trouble. The leader, Ralph Commander Sullivan, a burly man with a graying beard and steady gaze, was laughing as he told a story from the road. Beside him, Chuck, the youngest of the group, was balancing his coffee cup on his helmet while the others egged him on with laughter. It was a scene of pure camaraderie, a well-deserved break after a long week of work and riding. The sudden sound of the door slamming against the wall shattered the calm. A boy burst in, gasping for breath, his clothes dirty and his face soaked with tears. He couldn't have been more than 8 years old. The customers fell silent. His voice came out broken, trembling. "Help, please, they're beating my mum, they're killing her." Everyone shot to their feet. Ralph was the first to approach, crouching down to his level. "Easy there, champ. Where's your mum?" he asked in a deep but calm tone. The boy, his voice cracking, pointed across the highway. "At the Golden Sun Motel, the back room. That man is beating her." Ralph exchanged a look with the other 7. No words were needed. Within seconds, the Thunder Riders were on their feet, grabbing their helmets and heading out, their boots echoing across the wooden floor. The customers' murmurs faded as the boy, Tommy, was taken by the hand by Rose, the diner's owner, who hugged him and promised everything would be okay. Outside, engines roared with fury. The 8 bikers crossed the street, kicking up a cloud of dust. The Golden Sun Motel stood across the way, an old building with faded yellow walls and a flickering sign. The air smelled of dampness and gasoline. Ralph kicked open the empty reception door, his voice booming. "Police! Open up or we're breaking it down!" No one answered. From the back of the hallway came a sharp, feminine scream, followed by a heavy thud. The men ran toward the source of the noise. The door to room 106 was slightly ajar. Inside, the scene was brutal. A woman, Rebecca Martinez, was thrown against the wall, her face bloodied and her hair covering her face. In front of her, a tall man with rolled-up sleeves and a crazed look raised his fist again. Ralph didn't hesitate. He lunged at him. The door burst open, and the others stormed in like a hurricane. There was the sound of a body hitting the floor, a chair breaking, and a furious shout. Marcus Webb, that was the attacker's name, tried to fight back, throwing desperate punches, but against 8 bikers he didn't stand a chance. Chuck grabbed him by the neck, while Theo, the preacher, pinned him to the floor. Ralph knelt beside Rebecca, who was struggling to breathe. "You're safe now," he told her, wiping the blood with his bandana. "Your son came for help." She looked at him with wide eyes, unable to speak. Her body trembled. Marcus tried to get up, shouting, "You have no right! This is between me and my wife." Ralph faced him with a hardened expression. "No, asshole. When you hit a woman, it becomes everyone's business." At that moment, sirens wailed in the distance. One of the motel employees, frightened, had called the sheriff. The riders kept Marcus on the ground until the sound of patrol cars filled the area. 2 officers entered with weapons drawn, but seeing the scene, they lowered their tone. Sheriff Thomas Cruz, a man with a weathered face and thick mustache, entered slowly, taking everything in carefully. "What the hell's going on here?" he asked in a grave voice. Ralph explained briefly, pointing to Tommy, who was now crossing the room's threshold, hugging his mother. Thomas looked at the boy, then at the man on the floor, and finally at the bikers. "We'll arrest him for assault," he said as one of his officers handcuffed Marcus, who wouldn't stop cursing. "Good work, boys. Though next time, let the police handle it." Ralph nodded without arguing, but his eyes said otherwise. There was too much accumulated rage in that room. When they took Marcus out, Rebecca broke down crying. Tommy hugged her tightly. The riders stayed close, protecting them with a kind of silent respect. Thomas Cruz approached Ralph and spoke quietly. "You know who that guy is, right? Marcus Webb. His father has business dealings with half the county. He's got money and lawyers. This won't be easy." Ralph looked at him firmly. "Then we'll need to stay alert, Sheriff, because if that bastard gets out, he's coming back for her." The sheriff sighed, watching the horizon where the sun was already beating down on the hot asphalt. "I'll do what I can, but I'm not promising anything." Ralph turned to his group. "Let's take them to Rosie's diner. We won't leave them alone." The boy looked up, still trembling, and asked in a weak voice, "Are they coming for us?" Ralph smiled and ruffled his hair. "Not while we're around, kid." They left the motel slowly. A crowd of onlookers was starting to gather across the street. Rebecca walked supported by Chuck, while Tommy wouldn't let go of his mother's hand. The Thunder Riders moved around them like a wall of leather and steel. Crossing the highway, the sound of engines roared again, echoing with a metallic rumble that disappeared into the midday wind. Inside Rosie's diner, the silence turned to sighs of relief. Rose ran to Rebecca with a blanket, while the bikers sat down again, breathing heavily. Tommy kept staring at those huge men with eyes full of wonder. Ralph picked up his now cold coffee, raised it, and muttered in a hoarse voice, "To those who have no one to defend them." The others raised theirs in silence. Outside, the sheriff got into his patrol car, casting one last look toward the group. On his face was an uncertain expression, a mixture of respect and concern, because in that moment he knew clearly this wasn't over. It was just beginning. The metallic screech of the patrol car pulling away down the highway marked the end of a violent episode, but no one at Rosie's diner could say it was over. The news spread like wildfire through dry grass. Marcus Webb, son of influential businessman Clifford Webb, had been arrested for brutally assaulting a woman at the Golden Sun Motel. Rebecca Martinez spent the night in a small service room behind the diner, with Tommy sleeping beside her, clinging to her as if letting go might lose her again. Outside, under the yellow light of a flickering street lamp, the Thunder Riders were gathered, serious in complete silence. Sheriff Thomas Cruz had returned later that same night. He removed his hat and held it between his hands, as if carrying a heavy truth. "You need to be prepared. This case is going to get dirty fast," he said, looking directly at Ralph. "Marcus Webb isn't just anybody's son. He's got lawyers, powerful friends, and a bank account that works miracles. Word is they're already working on getting him out on bail." Ralph's face showed no surprise. He just clenched his jaw. How fast? Could be out in 3 days, maximum. A dry murmur rose among the bikers. Theo spat on the ground. "And she can barely walk. And the kid hasn't said a word since we saw him leave that motel," Chuck added, his voice breaking. "I don't have the power to stop the bail," the sheriff continued, "but I can make his life difficult if he tries to get near her. That is, if they know where she is." Ralph nodded. "Then we'll keep it that way. He won't know anything." That same early morning, while the sky was still a dark blanket over the desert, the Thunder Riders acted. They took Rebecca and Tommy to a safe house on the outskirts of town, in a rural area where only cacti and coyotes knew the roads. It belonged to Letty the Witch, the only woman in the club, who lived alone on a large plot with guard dogs and cameras everywhere. Rebecca could barely speak, but she accepted the help in silence. Tommy stayed glued to her, as if she were his only anchor. Letty made sure the house had food, clean clothes, soft blankets, and a bedroom where mother and son could sleep without fear. The next day, Ralph and Chuck went downtown to buy a new phone and an untraceable SIM card. They also secured temporary work for Rebecca, helping at a bakery owned by one of the bikers' sisters. No one at the business knew her story. They just called her the new helper. Meanwhile, the other club members took turns discreetly watching the area around Rosie's diner, the motel, and Clifford Webb's house. They drank coffee in silence, their ears tuned to the locals' gossip. But it didn't take long for the bad news to arrive. 3 days later, Marcus Webb was released on bail. The news came in the form of a short text from the sheriff. "He's out. He's going to look for her." The atmosphere in town changed. Faces became more cautious. Eyes averted. Some started asking with malice, "Who was that woman anyway? They say the bikers are hiding her. Aren't they the ones who caused all this to play hero?" The rumors grew. Someone saw Marcus cruising in his black pickup around the old motel. Another saw him drive past Rosie's diner twice, music blasting and windows tinted. One night, one of the diner's cameras caught a man leaving a note under the door. It simply said, "I know where they are. You can't hide her forever." Ralph burned it without a word. The riders were divided. Some feared getting in too deep. Rocky, one of the veterans, made it clear at a night meeting in the club's garage. "We're not cops or saviors. Getting this involved could cost us more than we think. That bastard has money lawyers, even political connections. He could tear our lives apart." But Theo stood up with fire in his eyes. "So what? We're going to step aside just because he's rich. What if that woman was your sister, Rocky, your daughter? What would you do?" Ralph intervened before the argument escalated. "We're already in it. There's no turning back. This isn't just about Rebecca or Tommy. It's about what we represent. People look at us with fear. They say we're bullies, troublemakers. You know what? Let them talk. I'd rather they say that than say we stepped aside when a mother needed help." Silence fell like lead on the tool table. No one else protested. That night they reinforced surveillance. Ralph assigned shifts. Letty installed a second line of cameras. Chuck taught Rebecca how to use a taser they'd gotten her. Even Tommy started to understand that the motorcycle men weren't bad guys, but silent guardians. But the harassment continued. One afternoon, Marcus showed up at the bakery, asking in a friendly voice if they had a new helper. The owner told him no, that he had the wrong place. He smiled, thanked her, and left his lawyer's business card on the counter. When Letty found out, she swore that if he showed up again, she'd knock his teeth out with a shovel. The community was divided. Some supported the riders. Others began talking about them as if they were a danger. Marcus's father had started a quiet campaign to defame them. Interviews, rumors, comments on local radio. They wanted to discredit them before the town saw the truth. But what Clifford Webb didn't count on was something stronger than his money. The memory of a boy who had seen hell and found salvation in the roar of an engine. One afternoon, as the sun set like fire over the hills and shadows stretched across the dusty streets, Tommy was drawing silently on a folded sheet of paper. When Letty asked what he was doing, the boy showed his work. It was 8 motorcycles surrounding a house, with a woman and a boy in the center. Above, in clumsy letters, he had written, "Thank you for saving us." That night, the Thunder Riders knew they didn't need approval. They were already part of something bigger. The days passed heavy, as if time itself had become thick. Rebecca slowly adjusted to a new routine. She woke before dawn, got Tommy ready for school, helped at the bakery in the afternoons, and returned to the safe house under the silent escort of the Thunder Riders. But beneath that routine hid a tension that hung in the air like thick smoke. Marcus Webb didn't stay quiet. One morning, Sheriff Thomas Cruz arrived at Rosie's diner with a folder in hand and a hardened expression. "Ralph," he said bluntly, sitting across from the club's leader, "Marcus filed a formal complaint against you guys." "On what charges?" Ralph asked, unsurprised but with an annoyance that showed even in his clenched fists. "Assault, breaking and entering, and the worst, attempted kidnapping," Cruz replied, dropping the folder on the table. The diner's murmur froze for a few seconds. Chuck dropped his spoon. Letty frowned, while Theo let out a long, tired sigh. "Kidnapping? We pulled a beaten woman out of a motel, and that's kidnapping now?" Letty burst out angrily. "It's a legal move. He wants to force us to return custody of the boy, and if the judge accepts the case, he can come after you." Ralph didn't respond immediately. He just took the folder, flipped through it briefly, then pushed it back. "What are you going to do, Sheriff?" Thomas Cruz sighed, looking out the window toward the highway. "Investigate, as the law requires. But I'll tell you this. Nobody in this town wants to see that woman back in that guy's hands. It's going to be hard for me to find anyone who's not on your side." But Marcus had more weapons than his complaint. One night, Theo was returning from the garage when he noticed a car following him for the 3rd consecutive block. It wasn't one from the club. He killed his taillight, turned into an alley, and when he tried to confront the vehicle, it accelerated and disappeared into the darkness. The next day, at the safe house where Rebecca and Tommy lived, they found an envelope slipped under the door. Inside was a photo of Tommy leaving school and a handwritten phrase, "They won't always be around." Letty tore up the image with trembling hands. "No more playing defense," Ralph said at an emergency meeting in the club's garage. "We're going to organize like never before. This isn't protection anymore, it's preemptive war." The Thunder Riders divided into groups. One watched Rebecca's house 24 hours a day. Another followed Marcus's pickup every time he left his residence. Chuck installed short-range radios and additional cameras. Letty taught Rebecca and Tommy how to act in an emergency, including escape routes to 2 safe houses. They also established message codes. If Rebecca wrote "burned bread," it meant someone was following her. If she wrote "no yeast," they should activate the evacuation plan. Meanwhile, the investigation into the complaint continued, but every testimony played in the bikers' favor. The motel receptionist said he heard cries for help. 2 customers from Rosie's Diner testified that they saw Tommy enter in a state of panic. The sheriff noted everything in his notebook, increasingly annoyed with Marcus's legal farce. The breaking point came one Wednesday morning. Rebecca was walking with Tommy toward the elementary school in the old neighborhood, under the early sun that barely touched the peeling walls. They always went with a light backpack, walking quickly, never stopping. That time, the black pickup appeared from around a corner and stopped abruptly in front of them. Marcus got out of the vehicle with a crooked smile. "Rebecca, I just want to talk," he said, raising his hands. "Look at us. Are you really going to keep hiding with that bunch of criminals?" Tommy clutched his mother's arm. Rebecca took a step back. "Don't come near," she warned, pulling out her cell phone. "You're going to hide my son?" "My son for how long?" Marcus shouted, taking another step forward. Suddenly, the roar of a motorcycle thundered down the street. Chuck appeared at full speed, skidding in front of the pickup. He jumped off, shoved Marcus backward, and positioned himself between him and Rebecca. "I told you to get out of town," he said through clenched teeth. "You can't threaten me," Marcus replied, his voice tense. "This is harassment." Chuck pulled out his cell phone and started recording. "It's not a threat, it's testimony. This isn't your turf anymore." Marcus tried to grab the phone, but Chuck twisted his arm and threw him to the ground, leaving him humiliated in front of the parents who were starting to arrive with their kids at the school. Murmurs rose. A teacher came out of the gate and recognized Rebecca. He helped get her and Tommy inside the school, while Chuck held Marcus on the ground. Minutes later, Sheriff Cruz arrived. He looked at the scene. Marcus with his shirt wrinkled, his face red with fury, and a dozen witnesses pulling out their phones. "Enough, Marcus," the sheriff said in a low but firm tone. "Keep this up, and you're going to lose a lot more than your legal case. You're going to lose respect, custody, and your freedom." "That boy is mine, and they're stealing him from me," Marcus shouted. Thomas Cruz approached, looked him in the eyes, and murmured, "That boy has already chosen who he fears, and it wasn't you." That afternoon, Marcus left town, without announcement, without goodbyes. It was just known that his pickup was seen heading north on the interstate, loaded with suitcases. They say his father advised him to leave before the media found out. They also say that social pressure and accumulated evidence made his lawyer quietly withdraw the complaint. The Thunder Riders didn't celebrate, not yet. Ralph gathered the group and said in a measured voice, "We don't let our guard down." Marcus left, but his shadow still looms large. Nobody relaxes surveillance. Rebecca, upon learning of Marcus's departure, didn't cry. She just sat in the kitchen with Tommy asleep in her lap, looking out the open window. "Is it over?" she asked quietly. Letty answered her honestly, "No, but you're not alone anymore." Night fell peacefully for the first time in weeks. The wind blew cool through the mesquite trees, and the engines remained silent. But the promise was made. If Marcus came back, the roar of thunder would be waiting. The morning sun fell softly on the red awning of Rosie's Diner. The outdoor tables were filled with laughter, frosted glasses, and the familiar smell of fresh tortillas. It was Saturday again, but not just any Saturday. That day marked 1 year since that moment that changed everything. Rebecca Martinez walked between tables with a tray balanced in one hand, light and confident, greeting regular customers with an honest smile. She wore the diner's apron with pride, her hair pulled back in a braid, and the steady gaze of someone who has survived fire. At the back of the place, the Thunder Riders occupied their usual corner. Leather jackets hung on chairbacks. Their laughter was calmer now, more familiar. No one looked at them with suspicion anymore. Now they were part of the town's soul. "Ralph, more coffee or should I take it away?" Rebecca asked in a playful tone. "If you take it, you take my life, girl," he replied with a tired smile. Theo raised his cup toward the ceiling. "To the best coffee in the Southwest, and the best waitress to ever walk these lands." Everyone applauded, and Rebecca blushed, lowering her gaze humbly. At a nearby table, Tommy, now 10 years old, was drawing with colors on a large piece of cardboard. He had longer hair, a more confident expression, and a laugh that no longer hid behind fear. Next to him, Letty watched in silence, as if guarding a treasure. At 11 o'clock sharp, Rose turned off the jukebox and gently tapped a glass with a spoon. All right. Quiet for a moment, family. Tommy has something he wants to share with everyone." The boy stood up, nervous but determined. In his hands he held a painting. It was large, colorful, painted with clumsy but intentional strokes. He turned it toward those present, and a profound silence fell. The image showed 8 bikers, their helmets raised, forming a protective circle. In the center, a woman in a long dress and a boy with a backpack were being escorted as if they were royalty. Above, written in large, uneven letters, it said, "Sometimes heroes ride motorcycles." Rebecca covered her mouth with both hands. Letty let out a halting sigh. Ralph blinked more than usual, as if dust had gotten in his eyes. Tommy took a deep breath and began to speak. "A year ago, my mom was trapped. She was scared. So was I. But when I heard the screaming, something told me I had to run. I was able to open the room door, I escaped through the back of the motel, and I ran here. I didn't know if anyone would help me. But when I saw the motorcycle men, I knew they would." A murmur of emotion filled the place. "That day I saved myself, but I also saved my mom, and you took care of her when I couldn't anymore. This painting is for you, because when people see this on the wall, they'll know there are heroes who don't wear capes, they wear helmets." Tommy lowered the painting and the applause was immediate, long, deep, an applause of community, of redemption, of justice. Ralph stood up, walked over to the boy, crouched down, and put a hand on his shoulder. "You're one of us too, Tommy, the bravest." Tommy smiled, and for the first time he felt part of something bigger than fear. The painting was immediately hung on the main wall of Rosie's diner. A rustic wooden frame surrounded it like a relic, and in a way, it was. The community started coming to the diner just to see it. People who a year ago avoided sitting near the bikers now greeted them, bought them coffee, asked for advice about their kids. Fear had turned into respect, respect into gratitude. That afternoon, as the sun began to set, Rebecca sat on the sidewalk next to Letty. "I never thought I'd get to this point," she said, looking at the painting. "For so long I felt weak, invisible, but now I feel like I can breathe." Letty lit a cigarette and offered one, which Rebecca declined with a smile. "You weren't alone. You just needed to know who to ask for help." "And you know the worst part," Rebecca continued, looking toward the highway. "Sometimes I still dream about him, about Marcus, but I don't wake up screaming anymore because I know that if he ever comes back, I won't be unprotected." Letty nodded. "And if he comes back, he'll have to face all of Thunder." At the Riders' Garage that night, the group gathered. There was no threat or urgency, just a silent need to ride. Ralph looked at his crew and said, "Today we're not patrolling. Today we ride because we can, because we want to, because this town is stronger for what we did." Engines roared like a synchronized steel beast. One by one, the 8 bikers headed out on the highway, leaving a cloud of golden dust behind them. Tommy watched them leave from the sidewalk, raising his hand. Rebecca stood beside him, her head held high. The setting sun painted the highway in orange and red tones. The silhouettes of the Thunder Riders stretched across the road, merging with the horizon. And amid the wind, the silence, and the memory, a truth became eternal. Sometimes heroes don't wear capes. Sometimes heroes ride motorcycles.